Marcus Sterling owned boardrooms, politicians, and people's destinies with a signature and a smirk. Everyone bent to his will until Dr. Amara Wright walked into his empire and refused to bow. What started as a power game became his unraveling. The man who had everything was about to lose it all to the one woman he couldn't break. Before we dive into this incredible story of power, pride, and the woman who shattered an empire, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of karma and justice. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. Now let's begin. The morning sun cast long shadows across Manhattan as Marcus Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, 42 stories above the city he believed he owned. At 42 years old, with $8 billion to his name, Marcus had built an empire on a simple philosophy. Everyone has a price, and for 20 years, he'd been proven right every single time. Marcus Sterling wasn't born into wealth. He'd clawed his way up from a middle-class suburb, and somewhere along that brutal climb, he'd learned that kindness was weakness and compassion was a luxury he couldn't afford. By the time he reached the top, those lessons had calcified into something darker. He didn't just win, he crushed. He didn't just succeed, he destroyed anyone who stood in his way. His reputation preceded him like a storm warning. When Marcus Sterling entered negotiations, grown men went pale. When his company targeted a competitor, employees updated their resumes before the ink dried on the acquisition papers. He'd forced a 70-year-old family business into bankruptcy just 3 months ago, not because he needed to, but because the owner had once refused to sell to him. Marcus didn't forget slights, and he didn't believe in mercy. His executive team had learned to read his moods like sailors reading the weather. They'd mastered the art of agreement, perfected the nod, weaponized the phrase, "Brilliant idea, Marcus." Nobody challenged him. Nobody questioned him. That was how he liked it. Complete control, absolute power, total domination. This particular morning, Marcus was celebrating his latest acquisition, TechMed Solutions, a small but promising medical technology company that had developed cutting-edge artificial intelligence for early cancer detection. Marcus didn't care about cancer or detection or saving lives. He saw assets to strip, patents to sell, and a 90-person staff that would be reduced to 12 by the end of the quarter. The company's research could be monetized immediately if he licensed the partially developed technology to the highest bidder. The rest was dead weight. His CFO had projected $30 million in immediate profit from the asset liquidation alone. Marcus smiled at the number. It wasn't about the money. He had more than he could spend in 5 lifetimes. It was about the win. It was about proving once again that he could take whatever he wanted. What Marcus Sterling didn't know, as he sipped his $15 espresso and reviewed the termination paperwork, was that 60 blocks away, Dr. Amara Wright was preparing for war. Amara had spent the entire night in the TechMed lab, running final diagnostics on the AI detection software that represented 6 years of her life. At 38, she carried herself with a quiet strength that came from surviving things that would have broken most people. She'd grown up in a neighborhood where gunshots were the soundtrack to childhood, where her single mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford regular doctor visits. Amara had watched her mother ignore symptoms for 2 years because they couldn't afford the time off work or the medical bills. By the time the cancer was detected, it was stage 4. She'd held her mother's hand as the life drained from her body, and she'd made a promise at that bedside. She would create technology that caught cancer early, that saved the mothers and daughters who couldn't afford to wait. The AI software she developed could detect 12 types of cancer in their earliest stages with 95% accuracy. It was revolutionary. It was personal. And now some billionaire who'd probably never worried about a medical bill in his life was going to destroy it for profit margin. Amara stared at her reflection in the darkened lab window. She thought about the easy path. Take whatever severance package they offered, walk away, find another job. She thought about her student loans, still substantial despite years of payments. She thought about her aunt who depended on her financially. She thought about all the logical, rational, self-preserving reasons to stay quiet. Then she thought about her mother's face, and she knew what she had to do. The conference room went silent when Marcus Sterling walked in. 90 employees sat in rigid rows, their futures about to be decided by a man who saw them as line items on a spreadsheet. Marcus didn't waste time with pleasantries or false comfort. He learned that quick cuts hurt less than slow ones. Effective immediately, TechMed solutions will be restructured. 80% of current positions will be eliminated. Severance packages will be distributed according to your tenure. Security will escort you out within the hour. The words landed like physical blows. A woman in the third row started crying. A young man stared at his phone, probably thinking about his mortgage. Marcus had seen it all before. He gave it 30 seconds of silence, respectful enough, not so long that it got uncomfortable, then turned to leave. "That's it? That's your entire announcement?" The voice came from the back of the room, clear and unwavering. Marcus turned, more curious than annoyed. A black woman stood up, her posture straight, her eyes locked on his. She wore a simple blue blouse and practical flats, and she looked at him like he was a problem to be solved, not a god to be feared. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Marcus asked, though his tone made it clear he wasn't sorry at all. "Dr. Amara Wright, I lead the cancer detection AI project, the one you're about to kill." "I'm not killing anything, Dr. Wright. I'm making a sound business decision. The technology isn't ready, the market isn't there, and the burn rate is unsustainable." Amara stepped into the aisle, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "The technology is 12 months from FDA approval. Our trials show 95% accuracy. Do you know how many lives that could save? Do you care?" Marcus felt something unfamiliar prickle at the back of his neck. Not anger exactly, but a kind of irritation mixed with intrigue. People didn't speak to him this way. "I care about reality, Dr. Wright. This company was hemorrhaging money. I saved it." "You bought it to strip it for parts. There's a difference between salvation and execution." The room was electric now. Every employee watched this unexpected confrontation like a tennis match. Marcus's jaw tightened. He should have shut this down immediately, but something about her absolute fearlessness made him pause. "I'm offering generous severance packages, including yours. I'd suggest you take it and move on." He turned toward the door, considering the matter closed. "I don't have a price, Mr. Sterling." He stopped, slowly turned back. "Everyone has a price." "Then you haven't met enough people." Their eyes locked, and for the first time in longer than Marcus could remember, someone didn't look away first. He did. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus tried every weapon in his arsenal. He offered Amara $2 million to walk away. She refused. He had his lawyers send cease and desist letters threatening her with lawsuits if she spoke to the media. She ignored them. He planted stories questioning her credentials and her research. She released her data publicly, peer-reviewed and irrefutable. Every move he made, she countered. Every threat he issued, she called his bluff. Marcus found himself thinking about her at odd hours, running imaginary conversations in his head, trying to find the lever that would move her. It became an obsession, his wife noticed. "You're different lately," she said one evening, watching him pace their penthouse living room. "Distracted." "Just a work thing," Marcus muttered. "This wouldn't be about that scientist you're trying to intimidate, would it?" His wife's voice carried an edge he'd never heard before. "I saw her interview. She's right, you know, about the lives that research could save." Marcus stared at his wife of 15 years as if seeing a stranger. "You don't understand business." "I understand you, or I thought I did. When did you become this person, Marcus? When did winning become more important than being decent?" He didn't answer because he didn't know. Somewhere along the climb, he'd lost sight of why he was climbing at all. Amara knew she couldn't win by playing Marcus's game. She had no billions, no lawyers on retainer, no media empire. What she had was something Marcus had forgotten existed: genuine support from people who believed in something beyond profit. She organized quietly at first. Cancer survivors whose families had been destroyed by late detection. Oncologists who understood the technology's potential. Patient advocacy groups who saw hope in her research. She built a coalition, not of money but of meaning. When Marcus called an emergency board meeting to finalize TechMed's liquidation, he expected rubber stamp approval. What he got was Amara Wright walking through the boardroom door with 3 lawyers and a file 6 inches thick. "This is a closed meeting," Marcus snapped, but his voice lacked its usual command. "Open it," said Richard Chen, one of the older board members. "I want to hear what she has to say." For 90 minutes, Amara systematically dismantled Marcus's empire. She presented evidence of 12 companies he'd acquired and destroyed, documented patterns of asset stripping that cost thousands of jobs, revealed creative accounting that had misled shareholders, showed emails where Marcus explicitly discussed destroying competitors rather than competing with them. But the moment that changed everything came when she displayed a photograph on the screen. A woman, 53 years old, smiling at the camera despite the IV in her arm. "This is Sarah Chen," Amara said quietly. "She's your daughter, isn't she, Mr. Chen?" She looked at the board member who nodded slowly, his face ashen. "Sarah was diagnosed with stage 2 ovarian cancer 4 months ago. Our AI detected it, in trials. She's one of 37 women whose lives we saved before Mr. Sterling decided those lives weren't worth his time." The room went deathly quiet. Richard Chen stared at Marcus with something beyond anger, with complete betrayal. "You knew about this?" Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He hadn't known. He'd never bothered to look at the trial data, never cared about the names behind the numbers. "Your own board member's daughter," Amara continued, her voice steady but her hands shaking slightly. "And you were going to shut it down. Not because it didn't work, not because it wasn't valuable, but because you don't see people. You see assets." The vote was 8-1 against Marcus. Only Marcus voted to proceed with liquidation. Within 72 hours, the media had the full story. Marcus Sterling, the billionaire who almost killed cancer-detecting AI to pad his portfolio. Marcus Sterling, who'd built his empire on the rubble of destroyed companies and ruined lives. Marcus Sterling, whose board had just voted to remove him pending investigation. His phone rang constantly, but the calls weren't from allies. They were from lawyers, reporters, and investigators. His wife's attorney served him divorce papers. His adult children released a statement distancing themselves from his actions. Partners who'd smiled at him over champagne suddenly didn't remember his name. Marcus sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by $40 million worth of art and furniture, and realized he'd never felt more poor. He'd spent 2 decades accumulating power, and in 3 weeks, one woman without a fraction of his resources had taken it all away. Not through money, not through connections, but through something he'd forgotten existed, standing for something that mattered more than winning. The SEC investigation took 6 months. Marcus wasn't charged criminally, but the financial penalties and forced divestitures reduced his net worth to $800 million. Still wealthy beyond most people's dreams, but for Marcus, it felt like poverty. More than the money, he'd lost his identity. Without the empire, without the power, without the fear he inspired, who was Marcus Sterling? He spent months in a fog of depression and rage, cycling through therapists and bottles of scotch. But slowly, painfully, something began to shift. In his forced isolation, Marcus started remembering things he'd buried for decades. The kid he'd been who wanted to build things, not destroy them. The young entrepreneur who dreamed of creating value, not extracting it. The person he'd been before power corrupted everything it touched. 7 months after their confrontation, Marcus requested a meeting with Amara. His assistant made the call nervously, certain she'd refuse. But Amara agreed, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of compassion. They met at a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from the Manhattan towers where power brokers made their deals. Marcus looked different, older, tired, but somehow more present than he'd been before. "Why did you agree to meet me?" he asked quietly. Amara stirred her coffee, considering. "Because I don't believe people are irredeemable, just lost sometimes." "I wanted to break you," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted it so badly. And when I couldn't, when nothing I did moved you, I didn't understand. How could you not have a price?" "Because my worth isn't for sale, Mr. Sterling. It never was. I know who I am and what I stand for. You spent so long trying to control everything outside of yourself that you forgot who you were inside." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes wet. "I've lost everything." "No," Amara corrected gently. "You've lost things you never really had. Power built on fear isn't power. It's a house of cards. Real strength is knowing what you stand for when the world pushes back." "Can I ask you something?" Marcus looked up at her. "Do you hate me?" Amara thought for a long moment. I hate what you did, what you represented. But you, I mostly feel sorry for you. You had everything and realized too late it was nothing. 6 months after that conversation, TechMed's AI software received FDA approval. The technology that Marcus almost destroyed for $30 million in quick profit was now valued at over $3 billion and saving lives across the country. Amara became the company's CEO, running it as a benefit corporation focused on accessible healthcare technology. Marcus Sterling slowly faded from headlines. He didn't attempt a comeback or a redemption tour. Instead, he started making quiet donations to cancer research, anonymously, without press releases or tax write-off announcements. He reconnected with his children, slowly, painfully earning back trust he'd shattered. He couldn't undo 20 years of damage, but he could stop doing more. On a cool evening in late autumn, Amara stood on stage at a cancer research gala, accepting an award for innovation in medical technology. She spoke about her mother, about purpose, about the importance of standing firm when the world tells you to bend. In the back of the ballroom, unnoticed by most, Marcus Sterling watched. He hadn't been invited, hadn't announced his attendance. He simply came to witness what integrity looked like when it won. When Amara's eyes found his across the crowded room, she didn't smile, didn't nod approval or forgiveness. She simply held his gaze for a moment, an acknowledgement that he'd been there, that she'd seen him, that perhaps seeing was enough for now. Marcus left quietly, stepping out into the New York night. He didn't have his empire anymore, didn't have his power or his fearsome reputation. What he had was harder to quantify, but somehow felt more real, the possibility of becoming someone he could respect. The man who controlled everyone had finally learned he couldn't control the only person who truly mattered, himself. In the end, Marcus Sterling learned what Amara Wright had always known. True power isn't found in controlling others. It's found in knowing who you are when the world strips everything else away. Money can buy almost anything, but it can't buy integrity, purpose, or the strength to stand alone when standing is all you have left. What would you have done in Amara's position? Would you have taken the money or stood your ground? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of karma, justice, and the courage to stand for what's right. Thank you for watching, and remember, your worth is never for sale.